Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of the TD Show. I'm National Tournament Director Chris Bird, a FIDE Events Manager for US Chess and the host of the TD Show. Tonight, I am joined by Associate National Tournament Director Steve Lampkin. Steve, good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening.
Good. Steve, you are our first ever Associate National Tournament Director on the show. It's nice to have people of all tournament directing levels. I'm sure you're just a short hair away from getting that NTD title at some stage. And
Yeah, I've got all the experience credits. I just need to take that exam again.
that's a grueling
That's a lot
exam.
of work.
So, Steve, tell for our audience, tell us a bit about your how you became a TD, how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, I was originally from the Buffalo, New York area, and when I was up there, my son was playing, and one of the tournament director that ran the tournaments in the area left town, and they said they needed somebody else to run tournaments, and I got
Yeah.
elected, started getting into it, and so I started running a lot of multi-day tournaments up in the Buffalo area.
All right. So you were
And
it, huh?
yeah, I was at yeah, tag. You're it. It's
Right.
almost TDC to get started. When I moved to Florida about 20 years ago, I got involved with the Florida Chess Association and started working the nationals because they were in Orlando every year and I was local. So that got me started
Okay.
on to the national level.
Yeah. Awesome. So, yeah, it's really nice to have you on the show here. And for those who don't know, tonight's, as you can see in the subject line there, tonight's subject is determination and completion of moves. It's quite the mouthful. I think it's the longest title we've had so far. So, but it should be a very simple topic once we get into it and give you an explanation exactly what determination and completion of moves means. There's different phases basically to each move, and you determine a move and then normally complete it by pressing a clock. But we'll cover a couple of situations where that's not necessarily the case. So, Steve, why don't we get right into it here and cover the first little part of what is determination and completion of a move. So as you can see, we're talking about Section 9 of the US Chess rules. And 9A is transfer to a vacant square. This is when you move a piece without capturing another piece. So presumably you're moving a piece to a vacant square if you're not making a capture of an opponent's piece. So in the case of a transfer of a piece to a vacant square, the move is determined with no possibility of change when the player's hand releases the piece, and it's completed when the player presses the clock. That seems pretty simple, Steve, so far.
Yeah, just want to point out I'm never big one on the exact terminology, but knowing the terminology of determination and completion is very important because as you go through the rule book, a lot of times it refers back to when the move is determined or completed in other rules. And I've seen a lot of very experienced TDs not really understand that subtle difference between completion and determination.
Yeah, so there are various rules where it says, well, if a move is being completed, like if you make it, if you complete an illegal move and things like that, then there's a penalty and stuff. So it's very important you know the difference here between the determination and completion of a move. Let's mush on to the next one, which talks about capturing. So 9B, capturing in the case of illegal capture. So this is taking an opponent's piece. The move is determined with no possibility of change when the player has deliberately touched both his or her own piece and the opponent's piece. So once both pieces have been touched, the move's determined. And again, it's completed when that player presses the clock. So we went over touch move in a previous episode and talked about deliberately touching pieces, your own pieces and your opponent's. So once you have touched your piece and your opponent's piece, the move is basically determined at that point, assuming it's legal, and then your move is completed once you press the clock again.
Yeah, and that's a little different than moving your hand from the piece, which determines a move normally. And it's important to point out too, if player picks up his piece and touches an opponent's piece with it, he's determined that that's the piece he's capturing if it's legal.
Yep, and we went over that again in the touch move episode. So check out that episode if you want to learn more about touch move. But for our purposes here, this is very simple from determining and completing when you're capturing an opponent's piece. So then we move on to castling. And 9C, in the case of legal castling, the move is determined with no possibility of change when the player's hand has released the king, which has moved 2 squares towards a rook, and completed when that player, having legally transferred the rook to its new square, presses the clock. So you should move the king. So once the king has moved 2 squares and been released, at that stage, basically your move is determined. You are going to be castling. And then, of course, you still have to move the rook and press the clock to complete that particular move. Of course, this is in direct violation of the variation that allows the movement of the rook first. Steve, do most of your tournaments use the rook first castling variation?
Yes, I usually allow that because, especially with kids, I do a lot of scholastic tournaments. And that's where I know you had the discussion in the touch move. Well, if he picks up the rook first, he's got to immediately move the king over.
Yep, exactly.
And that becomes a little bit, but it's determined once he touches the king. Then,
yes,
is the way I would interpret that.
Yeah,
and because
there's no other way to deal with it. I mean, the rule says it's determined when the players move the king and release the king. So I guess in that instance, they're just doing the completion part a little bit earlier. But I think the move is determined once they actually move the king in terms of casting.
I've seen players that'll move the rook over, grab the king, and hold it there. Think about it for a little while, like they have a choice at that point. They don't. They have to put the king down, complete the castling move as long as it's legal.
Yeah, assuming it's legal. All right, and then let's move on to pawn promotion, another special move. So in the case of a legal promotion of a pawn, the move is determined with no possibility of change when the pawn has been removed from the chessboard and the player's hand has released the new appropriate piece on the promotion square, and then it's completed when the player presses the clock again. So if the player has released the pawn on the last rank, the move is not yet determined, but the player no longer has the right to play the pawn to another square. So this is basically telling us that in terms of a pawn promotion, the move is determined once the player has basically put the promotion piece on the square and release that piece. We're going to see, I think there's another slide coming up next about pawn promotion that talks about as soon as that promotion piece touches the square, they no longer have the right to make any other different move, and just releasing the hand from that piece actually is the determination of that move. So just for clarification. So it gets a little wordy, I think, at this point, Steve. I'm not sure whether it's necessarily needed to be as wordy. There's a few words here that repeat what is already said elsewhere in the rulebook, but that's okay. And
people are used to, once they release a piece, they can't take it back. So.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same here, basically. Although in terms of pawn promotion, once the piece touches the square, they can't take it back. So, and we'll see here. The choice of piece is finalized when the piece has touched the square of promotion, regardless of whether the pawn has been physically touched or placed on the promotion square. Once a piece has touched the promotion square, a pawn must be promoted to that piece on that square, provided that the move is legal. So this is basically sort of a continuation a little bit of touch move as well. But this, this tells you, and this is letting you know that you can do promoting a pawn in the alternate way of, instead of pushing the pawn to the 8th and then removing it and putting it with a piece, you can just basically take a piece, put it on the 8th rank, and then remove the pawn from the board. So, but once
Right. And it's important to note here that they can touch pieces off the board. It's until they put the promoted piece on the square or touch the square that piece has to be moved. There's no touch move on the pieces that are not on the board.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is where it gets really fun, I think. Checkmate or stalemate. So in the case of a legal move which produces checkmate or stalemate, the move is determined with no possibility of change upon release as described in any of the previous rules, whichever applies. The move is completed simultaneously with its determination. This means if you determine a move that is checkmate or stalemate, it is simultaneously completed at that point. So you don't have to basically press the clock or stop the clock because it's checkmate or stalemate. And I'm going to show here quickly. Let me run over to the US Chess rulebook, and we'll look at this little TD tip down here that says, and this is for this rule, if the final legal move produces checkmate or stalemate, pressing or stopping the clock while recommended is not required because checkmate or stalemate immediately ends the game. So this is what I was saying here about this move is completed simultaneously with its determination. This might get a little messy, but it's not often this comes up. But if someone is very, very, very low on time and they're about to checkmate an opponent, it could be very crucial that someone is there observing exactly what happened, just in case. But remember, so when it says determination of a move and it completes it simultaneously, we talked about what it takes to determine a move. So like in the case of a capture, just basically touching those two pieces determines the move. So at that point, the move is also completed if that is a legal move. So you've just got to remember some fine points along those lines. But in terms of checkmate or stalemate, anything further to add on that, Steve?
Yeah, I think sometimes the problem comes up too. Somebody plays the move, thinks it's checkmate, and the opponent finds a way out of it or something. That can cause a little confusion at this time too.
Right. Last move of the time control. Someone is asking in the chat, it would still be checkmate if your flag is down. Well, this might help you. If your flag is down, it all depends when you determined and hence completed the move. So if you determined, and remember, determined and completed happens simultaneously on a checkmate. So as long as you determine the move before your flag falls, then your checkmate stands. If your flag falls before you determine the move, then theoretically, you could lose on time or whatever.
Yeah, and the general rule there is that unless there's a witness to prove that, the checkmate stands.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, let's go to last move of the time control. So when determining whether the prescribed number of legal moves has been made in the allotted time, the last move is considered complete only after the player presses the clock. The player's flag may be up after releasing the piece. It may be up while hitting the clock. But if the flag is down after the move and the opponent has not yet handled the clock, the player has failed to make the time control. So this is basically saying, Steve, we had something about this. If you don't, this is for one of these situations where you're talking about multiple time controls. Someone thinks that they think they've made 40 moves and they make the move on the board and they hit the clock but the flag still falls, then in theory they haven't completed 40 moves within the time control. So it's very important.
I've had that situation arise where somebody said, but I let go of the piece. I just, they think they'll use the term completed my move because they don't understand the difference and think the time control is made. But no, they haven't, because the move is not completed until that clock is pressed.
Yeah. And we got a couple of comments in the chat talking about the clock thing again. So if neither player has called the flag is not considered fallen. And that's correct. So it is up to the player to call the flag. But I think as a TD, if you witness at least, all this, it's very hard to determine when someone calls flag and the other guy, has determined a checkmate on the board and knowing exactly what came first. If you're there as a TD, you are an independent witness to help determine whether the flagfall claim came before the move was simultaneously determined and completed at that point. So.
Right. The other thing that I've seen happen too is the players rushing to make time control, and they're so relieved that they made that 40th move or whatever, they just forget to hit the clock.
Right. Yes.
And sit there for another minute and the clock falls.
Right. Yeah. No, I've seen. Yeah, I've witnessed them. I had one at National Open. I think Walter Brown, and they were using. I think it was an analog or digital, one of these Cytec with the silver buttons on the top. Walter Brown makes a move on the board very quickly and goes to try and hit the button, but doesn't hit it properly, and so his clock is still ticking away, and he just flagged. Yeah, and he's like, oh! And it was last move of the time control too. But okay, so anyway, last move of time control, we've got that one. And then also, except for 9E, 9E, remember, was checkmate or stalemate. There should never be a dispute about whether the final move of time control or a flagfall occurred first, because the player's task is to press the clock in time to prevent the flagfall. If the flag is down, the player has not accomplished this task, and the director must rule that the move was not completed in time. If the final move of time control produces checkmate or stalemate, then see 9E. And that's the one where I'm talking about where determining also completes the move at the same time. So therefore it's not necessarily you don't have to hit the clock to complete the move in terms of rule 9E, checkmate and stalemate. So, and this is exactly what we were just talking about. All right. Let's move on to a little unknown section of the rulebook, rules for visually impaired and disabled players. They do have a section in there about determining and completion of moves. And this is really talking about visually impaired people, players where they're using sort of a second board. They're putting the pieces into the pegs on their board and announcing the moves to their opponents. So a move is determined when all of the following procedures have occurred. So a piece is placed into a securing aperture or other device on the special chessboard. In the case of a capture, the captured piece has been removed from the board of the player who's on the move, and the move has been announced. At that stage, once all three of those things are done, the move is determined. And then only after completing these procedures shall the opponent's clock be started, and the move is completed when the clock is pressed. So, and nobody should be pressing that clock until all of those three things that determine the move has been completed. Steve, we were talking earlier about a disabled player who has a helper making moves for them on the board. And I think I came to the sort of conclusion that only section C of this would be sort of applicable. If the player themselves is not capable of making moves on the board for themselves, they have a helper helping them. Once they announce what that move is, I think at that point the move is determined. And then I think once the helper has made the move on the board and hit the clock, then it becomes completed. Would probably be my way of dealing with this. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I did actually happen once a tournament I was one of the assistants at. And there was a disabled player in a wheelchair, could not physically move the pieces themselves. And he had his wife helping him, taking notation and making the moves for him, which is perfectly allowable. But he told her a certain move, and she made the wrong move on the board. It was a legal move and caused them to lose the game. And the chief D at the time said, well, the piece was put on the square and released, and interpreted it like you would if the player was moving the piece themselves and just dropped it on the wrong square.
Right.
But I agree with you. I think it's more proper that whatever they announce, because if there was a real good chess player, a master chess player, noticing a blunder and made a move for him, then somebody else is moving for the player.
Right.
So I agree with you that if they announce the move, that should be determined.
Yeah. All right. And then we wanted to go back. 9G talks about determined moves, completed moves. So this is basically the sort of overarching thing that controls this whole section here. As described in 9A through 9D, there is a period between the release of a piece and the press of the clock, which the move is determined but not completed. And this particular portion of the move, the bit between determined and completion of the move, is very special. And the significance of this period is as follows, and there are a few things here. So 9G1, the player is still on the move for claims. So claims of draws by triple occurrence, insufficient losing chances, 50 move, remain in order during the period between determination and completion of the move. As soon as the player completes the move, it is the opponent's move, and the right to make such claims belongs exclusively to the opponent. So if you're going to offer a draw, this is, I believe, or if you're going to claim one of these types of draws, you need to do it before you complete the move, basically. In some cases, you might even do it before you determine the move, but once you hit that clock and complete the move, it's no longer your turn, basically. So you're not on the clock anymore for making those claims. And then,
right.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, it does happen on triple recurrence. Somebody hits their clock and then makes the claim, and it's too late.
Yep.
More the problem is an improper draw offer. They offer it before they make the move.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And then determination irrelevant to time control. So in the case of 9F, the last move of the time control, whether or not the player has determined the move is of absolutely no significance in deciding whether the player has made the prescribed number of moves in the allotted time. Player's flag must remain up after the final legal move has been completed, not just determined. This is just reiterating what it's already said in terms of 9F. And then draw offers, except for 14H2, which is resolution of 14H claim. The interval between determination and completion of the move is the proper time to offer a draw. And we all know that is the proper time to offer a draw. And there are numerous players out there that just continuously offer a draw, either before they've made a move, on their opponent's time, anything along those lines. And then there is a TD tip that comes with these, and it says the first step in resolving properly made draw claim, including insufficient losing chances, is to notify the opponent of the claimant that the claim is the same as offering the opponent a draw. However, the draw offer is proper even if a move has not been determined or completed. So basically that's saying the draw offer is on the table, whether they've determined or completed a move. If someone says, I offer you a draw, that is still active until the opponent rejects that draw offer in the appropriate ways. Anything else you'd like to add, Steve?
Yeah, no, other than that, the player, if the move hasn't been determined, the player can require the person to determine the move before they make their decision on the draw offer, but the draw offer still stands.
Yep, exactly. And then 9H, stopping the clock. If a player determines a move and then stops the clock to see a TD for any reason, rather than pressing it, the determined move is not yet completed, and the player is still on the move for claims. So once you make a move, if you stop the clock, get a TD for some reason, it is still sort of your move, so you can still make the claims and whatever. But once your opponent's clock is started, you press the clock, then your move is completed at that point. And then Steve, you had a very good idea. I was going to initially skip the blitz rules because who likes to go over our fun and fantastic blitz rules? But you convinced me that we should at least touch on the blitz rules. There's a couple of slight nuances here. So a player who has played an illegal move must retract it and make a legal move with the piece touched prior to pressing the clock. If no legal move exists with that piece, then he may make any legal move. Illegal moves unnoticed by both players cannot be corrected afterwards. An illegal move is completed when the player presses the clock. So this is very similar to the main rules. So an illegal move is not actually completed and finally illegal until the player completes it and presses the clock. So until they actually complete the illegal move, they still have time to go back and just correct that. With touch move in effect, of course, but still.
Yeah. Very common for a player, especially in a blitz game that's going so quick. As soon as the player lets go of the piece, they're trying to make a claim that they win because he made the legal move, which all they've really done is tipped them off. He's got to take that move back before he hits his clock.
Yeah. So, and then a legal move is completed when the hand leaves the piece. Now that is really interesting. So
yeah.
And basically what that sort of allows someone to do is basically make a move before the other player hits the clock. It sort of gets a little messy in blitz, but I think that is what that is sort of all about. So anyway, so it is the opponent's move once you've actually made a move and your hand has released the piece, whether you've hit the clock or not, because they've completed the move. So It's in the blitz rules. We're just talking about what's out there published. As TDs, we have to enforce what it says. But I think that is what that is all about. Would you think so?
Yeah, I agree with you. I really don't like that. You really should have to wait, but it's a way of using some of the opponent's time to make your move. And if you slow hitting his clock, you can actually move and simultaneously press your clock and not really use any time.
Yep,
but
exactly.
That's what it says. Oh,
yep.
That's what we enforce.
Right. And I think that covers everything between determining and completion of moves. So I'm just going to go back here one thing. It's very simple, but there are a couple of nuances that you need to know. For sure, learn about Section 9, determination and completion of moves. It's very simple to pick up on. You should easily get it. Most of the time, it's once they press the clock, then the move's completed, except for like basically checkmate and stalemate in the regular rules. But at other times, it's only determined once they've touched the necessary pieces, assuming it's all legal, of course. So if they determine something illegal, they are allowed to correct that before they actually complete the move. Anyway, let's get on to the fun bit of the night. Steve, you got anything final before we get into the trivia?
No, it's just that I think that's a subtle difference of determination and completion. It's important to really understand that, and it makes your TDing life a lot easier, because a lot of times that's what the argument's about is you let go of the piece, his move is complete.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's
exactly.
The clock.
Right. All right, so let's get into trivia. So I know you've all been waiting for the trivia. So let me go ahead and open up the poll here. So you can type 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat. Thank you very much for the birthday wishes, folks. Yes, tonight is my birthday. I'm working on my birthday, of course. But what would I rather be doing other than talking to TDs about TD stuff? So I'm here having fun. And trivia. So Steve came up with, I won't say all of the questions tonight. I threw in a couple of curveballs because I wanted to anyway. And Steve was being too nice with his questions, so I overrode him on a couple of questions. But anyway, let's get to question number 1. White moves a piece, leaving his king in check. Black claims an illegal move. What would you do? So think about what we've put here. So add 2 minutes to Black's clock. Would you add 2 minutes to White's clock? Would you 3 deny the claim since Black was not on the move? Or would you 4 deny the claim since White did not complete his move by pressing the clock? White gets a chance to correct his illegal move with touch move in effect if necessary. And I'd like to shout out hello to Anand, who is in the chat, and Tom Langland, who is also tuning in as well. So hey folks, I think we do have some other folks with us too. So please go ahead and cast your vote. So we've got 5 votes in right now, and everybody seems to be going for answer number 4 right now. Let's see if we can get a perfect 100% tonight to show that everybody was listening to everything I was saying, which would be a first, I think. I'm sure everyone was listening to everything you were saying, Steve. I think at some point they start tuning me out, but... And we've got 6 votes. Is there any more votes? I think that's like the majority of our viewers right now. Yes, exactly, Ken. I agree. I don't know what I said. I'll have to look later at the replay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the voting off for that and announce the results. And Steve, everybody, 6 people, all said no, answer number 4. What say you be the answer?
Okay, well, I like that one. That's the way I would handle it. But I'd have to give credit for number 3 too, because you can deny the claim because it was an improper claim, because you have to be on the move to make a claim.
Right.
But 4 is the best way to handle it.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to question number... I told you Steve's questions were too nice. Let's go ahead and open up the voting for this one. So remember to answer 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat. Black determines their move, but does not complete it. After several minutes, white makes their move. Black claims that white made a move before it was their turn and wants them penalized. What would you do? Would you warn white that he must wait for black to complete his move before he moves? Would you 2 warn black that he must press his clock immediately after determining his move? Would you 3 add 2 minutes to black's clock? Or would you 4 add 2 minutes to white's clock? That's 2 minutes all around, I think. Just keep adding 2 minutes. So we've got a varying opinion already between 1 and 2. I'm pretty happy only one of those 2 is the answers so far. Any more for any more? Come on, folks, get your votes in. Ooh, some people on the fence. I think all the I don't know, who's Rob USCF? Rob, what? I'm not even going to ask you to put what level of tournament there. It's irrelevant. You're here to learn, and that's good. We're all here to learn. Okay. Welcome to the show, Rob. All right, keep voting. Any more votes? I know people. We just need to do a show that's just completely trivia at one stage, because that's all people like is the trivia, I think.
Oh, that would be a fun show.
I think so. I think we should have, guests. I think we should have any TD in the country asking the questions as well, and just make it open subject. Anything you want to do, right. And we can all just vote on the answers. All right, let me go ahead and close the voting here. So we had 4 people vote for number 1, and we had 1 person vote for number 2. What say you is the answer, Steve?
I would do 1. Warn white that he must wait for black to complete his move before he moves. I don't think it's serious enough offense to penalize him. And warn black he must press his clock immediately after the termination move is wrong, because there is no wording in the rule book that requires somebody to press their clock immediately.
Yeah, the danger with doing that is, of course, they might be thinking about whether to offer a draw or not, or something along. It seems silly for them to leave their clock running, of course, the whole time. But in theory, it is their time that's still running. They're not causing any issues. I mean, they probably just forgot to hit the clock, and that's a whole other subject matter. Sometimes the opponents like to just remind them, "Hey, you forgot to hit your clock." Stuff like that. So
yeah, and most of the time, like you said, is that somebody just forgets you're involved in the game. You're thinking, but I have seen players that purposely do that because they want to call an illegal move or try and get a penalty because the other person moved on when it was still their move.
And someone is asking in the chat, is white expected to wait until black flags? Theoretically, yeah, you can. So, it's up to you whether it's a little unsporting to sit there and wait. But I've seen people who are in bad positions, especially when it gets to time trouble and someone forgets to hit the clock, and they just sit and they put their poker face on and pretend that they haven't noticed the clock, and they're just looking at the pieces and they're trying their best to not bring attention to the clock at all, because that's like the only way they're going to get out of it. So so I've seen that happen too. But
yeah, and that's perfectly legal. Like I said, maybe not the most sportsmanlike thing to do, but the other player's responsible to follow the rules too, and and it's illegal to help somebody with time control. So.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, let's move on to trivia question number 3. And let me open up the voting on this one. And I think we start to get into some of the fun questions, maybe. So, in a time control of 40 moves in 120 minutes, sudden death 30, delay 5, white plays move 40, knight takes f5, and presses his clock. However, white's flag is down, and black claims the flag fall. What would you do? Would you 1, white has made his 40th move on the board, and therefore the game continues? 2, simply black wins? 3, if black has both main material and a reasonably complete score sheet, black wins. If not, the game continues. Or is it 4, if black has both main material and a reasonably complete score sheet, black wins. If not, the game continues only if black has main material. Otherwise, the game is a draw. That's some very confusing answers that I put to this one.
Yeah, yes, you did. I didn't see this before.
I think we had a couple of answers to this one, and I threw, yes, the wording of 4 is absolutely terrible. I agree. But anyway, but it's not quite as simple a situation as you think, just because a flag fell. So,
right.
Going easy because it's my birthday. All right. Any more answers coming in the chat? So, and the questions only get worse. They go downhill from here because I came up with the rest of the questions. So, and I'm not even sure Steve has seen all of the questions, but I'm going to ask Steve to come up with the answer for this. What he would come up with. I'm going to give him the cue. I'm going to give him the cue as to what everyone else has voted for. So, do we have any more answers in the chat? So I mean, simply, if someone doesn't make time control, there's a couple of other things you have to consider, especially at the first time control here. All right, let me go ahead and close the poll. And everybody voted for number 4, Steve.
Really?
Yeah, everybody voted for number 4. What would you vote for? Just out of interest.
I was thinking number 3. Number 2 is incorrect because it's not a complete answer. But if he has mating material and a reasonably complete score sheet, black wins. And if not, then the game will continue because he doesn't have his complete score sheet or whatever.
Yeah, so the key difference here is yes. So the key difference here is the game continues only if black has main material. So even if at the first time period his the flag falls, white's flag falls, if black doesn't have main material at that point, the game is a draw according to the rules.
Right. Yeah,
So if he has one lonely pawn or something on the board, then unfortunately for him, the game will continue. And white gets a second life basically because gets a chance to win it because black didn't have because black does have winning material on the board. So if black didn't have that winning material, then it would be a draw at that point. But as long as his reasonably complete score sheet was up to date as well. But so it's a little weird and backwards that you can benefit by not having main material. So if black just had a king and a knight, then the game would be a draw. But yeah, so it gets a little messy. But it's
four's a more complete answer.
Yeah, it's a curveball that you're probably never going to come across, but I wanted to throw it out there anyway. So just for the fun of it. So let's go ahead and move on to question 4. And this one is a position. And this one I think is fun as well, just because, it can be fun. I could have made it, what's the word, funner? More fun. So people are having to go at my English in the chat here, since English is my second language. So question number 4. In the following position, white plays 57, f8, announces queen checkmate. However, a couple of seconds later, his flag falls and black claims flag. What would you do? So we've already got some answers in the chat. Would you 1, white wins, it's checkmate, pawn on queen, checkmate, yep. 2, black wins as the flag fall came before the move was determined. 3, declare the game drawn. Or 4, allow white to place his chosen piece on the board and then make a ruling. So we've got some answers, and predominantly people are saying number 3 here. And then I've got a special follow-up question that will be for bonus points, but not officially open in the poll, which is the question I really wanted to use, but my bad English prevented me from typing it all in. So, any more votes? I'll leave it open another 10 seconds to see if we get any more people voting. Come on, be brave, people. You don't even have to copy what other people are putting. That's the answer. It's an interesting position. Okay, let me go ahead and close off the voting for this one. Steve, I had 5 people that voted and everybody said 3. What would be your answer to this one?
Yeah, that is definitely correct. White can't win because black can't win because he doesn't have mating material on the board, and the move is not complete until the piece gets placed on the board. So
the key is it's not determined until he's taken that promotion piece and put it on the board and released it. So so my initial question was going to be, white moves the pawn to f8, grabs a queen, puts it on the square, but before he can release it, his flag falls. Then what is the result?
Right, and then his move, because it was checkmate, the completion, the determination and completion of the move happened simultaneously. He doesn't have to press his clock. So in that case, he wouldn't have to press his clock before the flag fell.
Well, here's the key when it comes to promoting a pawn. Remember, your piece is chosen when it touches the queen in square, but the move itself of promoting a pawn to something else is not determined until the piece is released on the square. So
determined and completed.
Right, and because it's checkmate, it would be determined and completed simultaneously at that point. But if he still had hold of that queen on the queen in square, and then his flag falls and black shouts flag before he releases it, which is, you're talking split seconds, then theoretically the flag fall would come first and it would be a draw. So anyway, that's how I wanted to. This seemed much more sensible to have as a question as opposed to the other one. But remember, so it is crucial that you know that in the determination. So your piece, when it touches the square, you have to use that piece, but your move is not actually determined until they release the piece. Yeah, that's the wording of the rules. I don't make that stuff up. So anyway, let's move on to question. Move on to question 5, and I think this is a question that you haven't seen before, Steve. So hopefully we'll try and get the right answer here. But let me open the voting here for 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a tricky position. Can everybody see that position? I hope. Hopefully nothing's cut off this week. I tried to fix that. In the following position, white picks up the pawn on f6 and touches the bishop on g7 with the pawn. However, before he can remove the bishop from the board and place the pawn on g7, white's flag falls, which black claims. What would you do? So white has touched the pawn on f6 and the bishop on g7, and then white's flag falls and black claims that. The rules committee will look. The rules committee will look into the previous thing about touching the promotion square. Anyway, so 1, is it white wins as checkmate has been determined? 2, the game is drawn as the flag fell, but black is unable to win by any normal means. Is it 3, black wins just because of the flag fall? Or is it 4, black wins only if he has a reasonably complete score sheet? And I think you're looking at this one along the right tracks, Rob. And the last, we gave a lot of hints to this one in the last question. But yeah, so this is fun, because this is all about determining the move, not necessarily finishing the move on the board, which is total reverse of the previous question, which everything had to be done on the board for it to be determined, whereas in this instance it doesn't necessarily have to be. So let's go ahead and close the voting on this one, and there we go, and announce the finish. So we had 5 votes and everybody went for answer number 1. Steve, and what would your answer be?
Yeah, I guess I would have to agree with him, because the move has been determined by touching the piece. And
exactly. So once, when it comes to especially checkmate, remember the move is determined and completed at the same time, and the move is determined in terms of a legal capture once you've touched your piece and touched the piece that you're capturing. So at that point, that move is determined, and because it's checkmate, the move is determined and completed at the same time. So all you got to basically do is touch those 2 pieces. Now, if white just picked up the pawn in this situation and didn't touch the bishop, the move is not determined because the pawn has more than one legal square it can go to.
Right.
It'd be interesting, say that knight was on f7 and white picks up the f6 pawn. At that stage, is the move determined? Because white only has one legal square it can go with the pawn. I would say no, because in the case of a capture, it says you have to literally touch the piece as well. So even though that is the only legal square that pawn can go to, there's nothing really in the rules that says if it only has one legal move, then no, I'm talking about putting the black knight on f7.
Right.
So Harold said knight f7 is check. But so if the black knight was on f7 and white picked up the f6 pawn, is that all he would have to do to win the game? And my answer to that is no. What would you think, Steve?
I'd agree, because even though there is only one legal move, he still hasn't determined it, because he hasn't touched the other piece.
Yeah. But it is interesting. So, and as Ken's saying, right, because the player could determine an illegal move, you can't assume that that's what he's going to... if you picked up the pawn and then moved it to e7 or captured the knight on f7, it's going to look silly. So, but they could still make an illegal move. But once they've touched that pawn and that bishop on g7, there's only one outcome here. And that is basically checkmate is on the board, even though it's not theoretically on the board yet. So... Anyway,
and now you're assured to get an appeal from black on that too. So.
Right. Yes. So that thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. That completes tonight's show on determination and completion of moves. Steve, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us tonight and sharing your.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Experience and expertise on this particular subject. It's been good to spend my birthday evening with you guys and talking about TD stuff. Steve, thank you once again. Next week's show, remember, 9 o'clock Eastern, I will be talking with National Tournament Director Tom Branscombe, and we'll be talking about one of our favorite subjects, spectators. So we all love spectators. So let's just ban them all from the room now, and we'll never have another problem with spectators ever again. So thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get the replay of this show up as soon as we possibly can. But for now, from Steve and I, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.